mean, I have no reason to think that it is seriously interested in negotiating a settlement. I think it has no interest in laying down arms, and that's because it can smell victory. I mean, the Taliban has long believed that it's winning this fight, and I think it feels that once U.S. troops are gone, they'll have a great battlefield opportunity, so to speak, to finish off the job and finish off a fight that they believe they're winning. I think it's very unlikely that the Taliban would seriously entertain the idea of even committing itself to sustained peace negotiations unless it's feeling more pressure on the battlefield. So in other words, if the Afghan security forces were able to take back a lot of the territory that the Taliban has seized, and if the Taliban were to suffer losses in the battlefield in a big way, that may make them feel more on the defensive and be willing to come to the negotiating table. But given the battlefield dynamic right now, as we've discussed it, Afghan forces are the ones on the defensive. They're the ones that are really struggling. So I think at the end of the day, it really comes down to the issue of legitimacy. If the Taliban really does value the legitimacy and the international recognition that it got from signing an agreement with the U.S. government last year, that suggests that it would not want to keep fighting and trying to seize power by force, because it knows if it did that, it would lose the legitimacy and the recognition that it's earned. It would not receive any type of financial aid, foreign assistance from the international community under those circumstances, and it would be a global pariah again, like it was in the 90s. So that's the only issue. If the Taliban is concerned enough about maintaining that legitimacy, I think that's something that would hold it back from trying to just seize power by force. But I don't know. I'm not really sure how seriously it's concerned about the legitimacy issue at this point. Unfortunately, it's not surprising. Once President Biden announced his decision to withdraw in April, I think it was quite inevitable that the Taliban was going to respond by putting a lot of pressure on the Afghan government, by scaling up offensives, by trying to surround cities, and so on, which it's done. But I do think what is surprising is the speed and the rapidity at which it has launched these offensives. I think that very few analysts would have expected the Taliban to have seized literally dozens of districts in Afghanistan over a period of just 2 months. And so I think that the intensity and the speed with which it is leading this offensive is really what's the most cause for concern. One is that the Taliban has the capacity, it has always had the capacity to do the types of things that it's doing now, but it's actually held back in the past. The Afghan security forces have been weak and beleaguered and overmatched ever since the end of 2014, when the NATO combat mission officially ended, and that's what put Afghan forces on the front lines to fight an insurgency that they weren't ready to fight, quite frankly, despite their improvements in capacities and in warfighting skills in recent years. But what we're looking at now is that I think the Taliban has seized an opportunity. It knows that U.S. forces are finally going, and that it feels it has an opportunity to put as much pressure on the government as it can by exploiting these very significant deficiencies within the Afghan security forces. And I think that you could also chalk this issue up to other factors too, including just bad leadership from the Afghan government, poor coordination with military leaders, and not doing a good enough job to make sure that Afghan soldiers are equipped and prepared. I mean, there have been plenty of stories of Afghan troops surrendering to the Taliban just because they've run out of food and water. And that clearly is a failure of leadership there. If the Afghan military leadership, and especially the government leadership, is not in a position to make sure that foot soldiers are at least getting basic supplies, that is very concerning.